The idea was very simple. A food pantry would come onto AmpleHarvest.org and fill in their pantry information. It would be added to a database. The next thing that would happen would be that a gardener looking to find what can I do with my food would go to AmpleHarvest.org, put in where they live, up would come a list of the food pantries that are in our database. They would select the one that's most convenient to them, and then they would deal directly with the pantry. I want to go biking. I don't want to be involved with dealing with food, so there was zero logistics on my part. We were not going to get involved in the transportation of the food or the logistics. This was between the local grower and the food pantry. So everything that was necessary for the grower to deal with the food pantry today and in the future was put onto the site. Now sometimes when people were using AmpleHarvest.org, I would get new ideas. I met with some people in Des Moines yesterday and got some new ideas. So this is a continuing process. This particular food pantry, His Hands Food Cupboard, Brighton, Colorado, did something that I had never expected. There's a field on the lower right, additional information, where the food pantry can say this is whatever, free-form text. I thought they would say, call before you come, use the back door. This food pantry said, we need these store-bought items. And I looked at this and said, oh my God, they're talking back to the community. I had never envisioned AmpleHarvest.org as being a way for the pantries to talk to the community. I just thought it was a way for growers to find pantries. I started to realize that this was bigger, getting bigger and bigger and bigger, because in the past, people would donate whatever they wanted and could to a pantry without regard for what the pantry really needed. For the first time, pantries across America could actually talk to the growers. So what ended up happening on AmpleHarvest.org as time has gone on, and we're just shy of 5 years old now, is the innovations that AmpleHarvest.org represents have been growing as more and more people come to us and say, hey, do you know you've done this, or that we are now able to do this? So right off the bat, as a innovation, there's no new infrastructure, and that was a really important thing. I built AmpleHarvest.org without building any pantries, without planting any gardens, just connecting the dots. There was a disconnect. Remember those old stop signs? I took the stop signs down. The dots were gone, and the two of them were connected. The existing resources were there. The pantry was there. The growers were there. And more importantly, the desire, I think, of growers to make sure their food doesn't go to waste was there. So I was tapping into the fact that none of us want to see waste, especially when it comes to something as valuable as food. A feedback loop was created. So not only could the growers bring food to the pantry, but you saw the pantries could actually talk back to the community. Imagine a pantry serving a Jewish or Muslim community saying, please, we don't need pork and beans. Maybe a pantry serving a geriatric community saying, please, no diapers, but maybe depends. This is the first time that opportunity really came about. What AmpleHarvest.org started to represent was the opportunity to reduce the waste stream. I started to see the bigger issue factors that AmpleHarvest.org was addressing. That, again, was not in that early stage thinking. This was just a geek connecting dots, but this became part of a much bigger solution than I had at first envisioned. One of the problems food pantries have historically had with accepting fresh food is refrigeration and storage, or the lack thereof. They were afraid that if you brought in a lot of stuff, they would need a lot of refrigeration. And for those of you who don't know and have never been to a food pantry, many of them are in the basement of a house of worship. 70% of pantries are in a house of worship, by the way. They're run by your grandparents. There's no technology. Think of a tiny grocery store with no cash register. Have that picture. Some of them are much more advanced and more sophisticated, but keep that as a mainstay of what your average food pantry in the country looks like. Now, there's something in manufacturing or in commerce called just-in-time inventory. And that was, again, part of the geeky side of me. Just-in-time inventory is when things are brought into a process just in time for when they're needed. So imagine when Boeing's building an airplane, and they arrange just as the fuselage is built, the delivery of the wings come in, so they can connect the wings just at the right time, and the wings are not sitting off on the side taking up space. And so as each part is needed, you bring it in. This is what's called a supply channel solution, where things come in just as you need them. By having AmpleHarvest.org have in it the ability for the pantries to tell the gardeners when to come, day of the week, time of the day. The gardeners, number one, knew when to harvest, but the pantries are now also telling the gardeners, please bring in the food just in time for when the clients are coming to pick it up. So let's say the pantry is open on Sundays from noon to 3, and the pantry tells the gardeners, please come Sunday 9 to noon. Now, the gardener knows when he or she should harvest: Sunday morning, Saturday night. Food's freshly harvested, they take it to the pantry Sunday morning. Sunday afternoon, the food goes back out to a client, and it's on their dinner table Sunday night. So number one, the food that the clients were getting is fresher than you and I can buy in a supermarket. It also addressed an ethical issue that people often don't think about. In our current economy, where many of us have neighbors who've been laid off. My wife was out of a job for a year and was looking for a job, so we understand that. It's entirely plausible that you are going to bring food from your garden while your friend or next door neighbor is at the pantry picking up food for his or her family. You don't need the embarrassment, and they don't need the humiliation. So the idea was, if we separate the donor and the recipient, the grower and the family needing the help, by a little bit of time, the donor would be bringing food to the pantry knowing it's going to go to somebody in the community, but not knowing who. And the recipient knew it came from somebody in the community, but they didn't know who. So an ethical issue was addressed by simply this management of time and information. I was also counting on the viral spread of this. I knew that this was something that was a feel-good, do-good sort of thing, and people like to share that. So that once somebody knew about AmpleHarvest.org, when somebody complained to them over the fence that they had too many tomatoes, they would start to pass the word. As a matter of fact, what I was expecting was that once somebody in the community knew about AmpleHarvest.org, they would become the vector for that information in the community. And they wouldn't actually send the people in the community to AmpleHarvest.org to find where the pantry is, because they already knew that St. Mary's Church, the YMCA, the Salvation Army, was open at this time. They would just send them right over there. So there was a massive multiplier effect that became available simply by this particular design here. It also reduced your taxes because it reduced the waste stream, thinking about that. And lastly, for the millions of people in this country who would like to give charity but just don't have the money in their pocket, this opened the opportunity for people to reach into their backyard instead of their back pocket to help their neighbors in need. So this is from a gardener in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Now, I went to school in Bridgeport. Beautiful city, but it's a really badly run-down urban area, but there's still people gardening. So try to picture in a community like that where this food is in desperate short supply and somebody had a harvest like this that would have been thrown away. This is food that actually went to a food pantry in Bridgeport. This could happen in any city in the country. I want you to look at this map. This is a map of Washington, D.C. That pin is Miriam's Kitchen. It's a soup kitchen in Washington. Friends with the chef, the White House donates excess food from their garden produce to this particular soup kitchen. The circle, 9-mile radius, 250 square miles. So you're covering Washington, you're into urban, suburban, and rural areas there. And I'm going to ask you to visualize how many backyard gardeners live in 250 square miles. And I don't know what the number is, but I'm going to assume it's not zero. Nobody's been doing backyard gardening in downtown Washington except maybe Michelle Obama at the White House. And I've been there, by the way. If you ever do go to D.C., absolutely visit the White House Kitchen Garden. It's magnificent. It really is. And they have no deer problems because lots of guys with guns walking around. But visualize how many gardeners. And just keep that picture in your mind, because the heart of AmpleHarvest.org metrics is not the amount of food, it's the amount of opportunity. And I'll explain that in a moment. So AmpleHarvest.org rolled out May 20th, 2009. The first food pantry was a food pantry in Pompton Plains, New Jersey, not too far from me. June 20, a month later, 100 food pantries across America. Now, what I did was a very scattershot approach. I reached out to all the Feeding America food banks, all 203 of them. They had no idea who I was. They'd never heard of AmpleHarvest.org. I sent them all an email saying, got this great idea, this great new program. Please share this information with the food pantries you work with. Some of them said, oh God, great idea. They did it, and many others at the point had no idea what I was talking about, what was being sent. But you could see where it started clustering. 2 months later, 500 food pantries. And for every one of these pins, please keep in mind, a 250 square mile area around the pantry. Except for Texas, everything's bigger in Texas. Make it a much bigger circle. 1,000 food pantries. October 15, which happened to be World Food Day. I couldn't have asked for a better coincidence. May 30, about a year after I rolled out AmpleHarvest.org, 2,000 food pantries. Now, by the way, what's the population of food pantries? Nobody knows for sure. Feeding America's estimate when I rolled out AmpleHarvest.org in 2009 was 28,500. Today, 33,500, which means that over the 5 years, 5,000 new pantries have come up, which means actually we have more of a problem than we had, which is all the more reason for a program like AmpleHarvest.org and the work that Cultivate Iowa does. 3,000 food pantries at the end of 2010, 4,000 in 2011, 5,000 in mid-2012, and today just shy of 6,700 pantries, or 1 out of every 5 in America. Now, this is the work that we've been doing, and this is where we're up to. We have a long ways to go. You're going to notice something, and Betsy and I were talking about this in the car as we drove here this morning. There's a very unambiguous line down the middle of the country, and I have no idea of why. We treat New York and New Mexico, and we treat South Carolina and South Dakota exactly the same. Why is it that this model and this messaging has resonated so well on the right, the top, and the left of the country, and far less so in that left area? I don't know, and it's not just us. WhyHunger.org and other hunger organizations said they have the exact same issue in terms of the work they're doing. Hunger is across the country. Every town in America has at least one food pantry, and while there's a lesser population density there, we don't have an answer. We were discussing, could it be because it's Hispanic or because it's further south and migratory? We'll take a look at Texas versus Florida. So if any of you have thoughts on this, I'd love to hear it, but this was a real eye-opener for me, and I suspect it is for you. We're not done working on this by any measure. I just wanted to share this with you. It's been an interesting problem that nobody has highlighted in the past of food programs where they clearly work. And by the way, Iowa's in the thick of where pantries are doing well. Iowa has 1 pantry for every 15,000 people registered, which is nice. Texas, 1 for every 150,000 people. So you guys are beating Texas hands down.
The response to this initiative has been overwhelming. I mean, all kinds of faith communities have been stepping up. Muslim community leaders are hosting sports tournaments to encourage young people to get active. The Jewish Community Centers Association is working with JCCs around the country to grow gardens and to get fresh food in underserved areas. And they're creating early child wellness programs. Groups like the National Council of Churches have joined with an organization called AmpleHarvest to help gardeners donate fresh produce to 4,700 of their local food pantries.
Now, what happened in 2012 was that when Let's Move rolled out, I had written to the White House and I said, I got this great program. I heard the First Lady just launched this program. Can we work with you? And some person, I have no idea who he or she is, wrote a thanks but no thanks letter. Okay. At the end, 2011. At the end of 2011, my wife and I were invited to the White House Christmas party to meet the President and First Lady. So the message got through. In February 2012, which was the 1-year anniversary of Let's Move, I get an email from the White House staff saying, you may want to follow the First Lady's speech. She's speaking this weekend in Florida. And I watched it streaming over the internet, and my wife was then wondering, why is my husband screaming upstairs? We have been very, very fortunate to have immense support from the White House, both the East and the West Wing. Michelle Obama has both spoken and written about AmpleHarvest.org, and I'll give her book a plug. If any of you have ever want to have a really lovely gift to give, she's written a wonderful book called American Grown. It's a tabletop, beautiful book about the White House kitchen garden and about community gardens, this whole thing, and AmpleHarvest.org has a whole sidebar in there. She does speak about it as Ample Harvest. The name is AmpleHarvest.org, but again, she's surrounded with guys with guns, so I'm not going to argue with her. But we're deeply indebted to the support we've had from the First Lady's office in terms of the support of AmpleHarvest.org.